Sage 50's inventory features track the goods and services that your company purchases and sells to others. As you make inventory-related transactions, Sage 50 posts the information to the general ledger and adjusts the quantities and costs of goods accordingly. The first step in the process is to add the items that you will need to track into Sage 50. As you add items, you can change the default information that you set up in the Inventory Item Defaults as needed. To add inventory items, just select Maintain and then Inventory Items from the menu bar to view the Maintain Inventory Items screen. Notice that there are up to 6 tabs into which you can enter information within this window. They are General, Custom Fields, History, Bill of Materials, Item Attributes, and Serial Numbers. The Serial Numbers tab is only available in Sage 50 Premium Accounting or higher. You begin by assigning an item ID. Then enter a short description for the item into the description field. Next, you select an item class from the item drop-down list. Every item will fall into one of the classes that are defined. Item classes define the type of item that you are creating. Item classes determine how an item's costing information is recorded. Once you save an item as a class of item, you cannot change the item class. Let's review the different classes of items that we can create within the Maintain Inventory Items screen. First, you have stock items, and stock items are used to track traditional inventory items. Sage 50 tracks the quantity, average cost, vendors, stock reorder point, and quantity on hand for these types of items. Master stock items are a special class of stock item that contains attribute information about several types of substock items contained within it. You can go to the master stock item to maintain the substock, as you cannot directly change substock items. Serialized stock items, which are only available in Sage 50 Premium Accounting and higher, are used to track inventory items that use serial numbers for identification. Sage 50 tracks the quantity, average cost, vendors, stock reorder point, and quantity on hand for these items. You can also track warranty and recall information for these items. Non-stock items are used for items that you sell but don't place and hold as inventory. Sage 50 doesn't track the quantity on hand for these items, and there is no costing method. The description-only line item is used for line item comments within an invoice. Nothing about this is tracked. The service class is used to represent services you apply to your salary and wages account. This is useful for services provided by your employees, and you can enter a cost for the service. The labor class is used to represent labor that you apply to your salary and wages account. This is useful for labor that is provided by subcontractors, and you can enter a cost for the labor. The assembly class is used for package or combination items within your inventory that can be assembled or disassembled from other existing items within your inventory. The serialized assembly class, which is only available in Sage 50 Premium Accounting and higher, is used to track package or combination items that use serial numbers for identification, and which can also be assembled or disassembled from other existing items in your inventory. The activity item is a class that's used to indicate how time is spent when performing services for a customer. These are used in employee and vendor time tickets when you plan on billing customers for activities performed by employees or vendors, meaning subcontractors. The charge item class is used to identify reimbursable charges incurred when performing services for a customer. These are used in employee or vendor time tickets when you plan on billing customers for reimbursable expenses. Now, on the General tab, you enter the specific information for the selected item. Depending on the class that you selected for the inventory item, some fields may not be available on the General tab. You also enter the beginning balances for inventory on this tab as well. In the description field, you select either for sales or for purchases. You can enter 2 descriptions per item. one which appears for sales forms, and one which appears for purchase forms. Enter the sales price into the Price Level 1 field. For stock and assembly items, you can enter the last purchase price paid for the item into the Last Unit Cost field. Once a beginning balance or transaction is entered using this item, this field is updated by Sage 50. For non-stock, service, and labor items, enter the cost of sales amount that should be posted when the item is sold. Next, select one of the 3 available costing methods from the drop-down menu of choices for the cost method: FIFO, LIFO, or average. Note that this cannot be changed after the item has been saved. It will only be available, however, for stock and assembly items. You can then continue by entering the UPC or SKU code for the item. Then enter or select an item type of your choosing. This is used for filtering reports. You can enter a description of the item's physical location into the location field. Then enter how the item is sold in the stocking units of measure field. This is optional as it is never used in calculations. You can also enter a weight for the item. Weight totals can actually be printed on reports, providing you use the same unit of measurement for each item. Next, enter the income account that will be credited when the item is sold into the General Ledger Sales Account field. Enter the inventory account that will be debited when the item is bought and credited when it is sold into the General Ledger Inventory Account field. You can enter the expense account that will be credited when a non-stock item is sold into the General Ledger Salaries/Wages account field if available. This account will be reduced and the cost of sales account will be increased when a non-stock item is sold. Then enter the cost of goods account that will be debited when the item is sold into the General Ledger Cost of Sales account field. You can then assign the item an item tax type. Finally, enter the minimum stock number into the field of the same name. This is the quantity at which you reorder stock. It is used for stock and assembly items only. Also enter the reorder quantity, which is the number of items usually purchased when the minimum stock level is reached. Also specify the preferred vendor for this item in the Preferred Vendor ID box. If you have a buyer, you can specify the employee ID of the buyer by using the Buyer ID field. When you're ready to enter beginning balances for your items, assuming that you are setting up your company, you will click the Beginning Balances arrow. We will discuss this later. For now, congratulations on getting through the General tab. Click the Custom Fields tab. Here you will enter any information for this item into the fields that you decided to set up when you set the values in the Inventory Item Defaults window. Click the History tab. You can't make changes to this window, but it does show useful information. It will display the period history date, and for that date, the number of units sold, dollar amount of sales, number of units received, and the total cost for the item. Next, you can click the Bill of Materials tab, and here you can enter information about your assembly class items. If the item that you are entering information for is not of the assembly class, then you can skip this tab as it will be unavailable anyway. An assembly is a group of products which you sell as a unit. To create an assembly item, you must select the required component items and enter the quantities needed of each on the Bill of Materials tab. If you want the items that make up an assembly to print as separate line items within invoices, then click the Print Components on Invoices checkbox. You would then select the item ID of the first item used in the assembly. You can use any stock, non-stock, description, assembly, labor, or service item. Next, enter a short description for the item for reference into the description field. Next, type in the quantity needed of the item in order to build the assembly. You can also use the Add and Remove buttons at the right side of this tab to add and remove item components for an assembly. Make sure that you enter all of the items needed in order to create the assembly item. You can click the Item Attributes tab only if you set up the item as a master stock item by using the Item Class dropdown. On this tab, you set the primary attributes and secondary attributes for the selected master stock item. These attributes could include things such as size, style, and color, for example. As you set the attributes, Sage 50 will create substock items of every possible combination between your primary and secondary attributes. Under the Primary Attributes section, you enter the name of the primary attribute that you have set. Then give the first specific instance of the set an ID code by typing it into the ID field. Type the description for the specific instance into the Description field, and then click the Add button to add the attribute to the list of primary attributes. Note that you can also select an attribute within this list, and then click the adjacent Remove button in order to remove it. Under the Secondary Attributes section, you once again enter the name of the secondary attribute set. Then give the first specific instance of the set an ID code within the ID field. Type the description of the specific instance into the Description field, and then click the Add button to add the attribute to the list of secondary attributes. You can also select an attribute within this list and click the Remove button to remove it. Once you save a master stock item, it will generate every possible combination of primary and secondary attributes as separate stock items, which are called substock. These will display within the Created Substock Items list. The item ID of substock is the combination of the ID code for the master item plus the ID codes of their primary and secondary attributes. You cannot delete a substock item without removing its attribute ID, but you can check the inactive checkbox for any created substock item to inactivate it. Make sure that you click the Save button when you're done entering any new item information to save it. You can click the Serial Numbers tab only if you set up the item as a serialized stock item or serialized assembly by using the Item Class dropdown. On this tab, you can set warranty information for serialized stock if needed. To do this, check the This item is covered under a warranty checkbox. To set when the warranty expires, simply enter a number into the spinner box and then select a time increment from the drop-down within the Warranty Expires blank blank from sale label within this warranty period section. In the future, you can look at this tab for this item to view the warranty and status information for the serialized merchandise you have bought and/or sold. To remove inventory that you don't use, with the exception of the substock as noted above, you can simply open up the Maintain Inventory Items list and select the inventory item that you want to remove. Then click the Delete button to permanently delete it. If you've used it in transactions, though, you must not delete it. You have to make it inactive instead by selecting the checkbox for Inactive at the top of the window and then clicking the Save button in the toolbar at the top of the window.